In a world where media is dominated by corporate conglomerates and free speech is often stifled by political correctness, one man, without academic credentials, without political affiliations, and without conforming to any societal mold, quietly built an empire from a single microphone. Over 2,000 podcast episodes, billions of listens, and countless guests, from presidents, billionaires, and scientists to society's outcasts, have all sat across from him for uncensored conversations. His name is Joe Rogan, and the Joe Rogan Experience isn't just a show, it's a movement. But to understand how a former Taekwondo fighter, a second-tier comedian, and a game show host who made people eat bugs became the most influential figure in the podcasting world, you have to go back to the beginning. Joe Rogan's journey isn't just about mastering technology and media. It's about surviving a battle to protect individual voice in an increasingly filtered world. Behind the confidence, the tanned skin, and that warm baritone voice lies a long story of a chaotic childhood, rebellion, risky decisions, and an uncompromising life philosophy. This isn't just a profile of a famous personality. It's the answer to a modern phenomenon. How did a lone individual, with no major network backing or Hollywood machine behind him, become one of the most powerful and controversial voices on the planet? If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Biography and early life. Joe Rogan, whose full name is Joseph James Rogan, was born on August 11th, 1967, in Newark, New Jersey. He's the only child in a family of Italian and Irish descent. His father was a police officer, but Rogan's childhood was anything but stable, especially after his parents divorced when he was just 7 years old. The relationship with his biological father deteriorated, and Rogan has admitted he had no contact with him for decades. That emotional distance would profoundly shape his worldview and develop the fiercely independent and tough personality he's known for today. After the divorce, Rogan moved around with his mother, living in several places including San Francisco, California, and Gainesville, Florida, before eventually settling in Newton Upper Falls, Massachusetts. That's where he spent most of his teenage years. While attending Newton South High School, Joe wasn't an academic standout, but it was during this time he discovered martial arts, initially as an outlet for his anger, anxiety, and lack of direction. At age 14, he began training in Taekwondo, then karate, quickly showing remarkable talent. By 19, he had already won the Massachusetts State Taekwondo Championship. Although he enrolled at Boston University, Rogan never really bought into the traditional academic path. He dropped out before finishing his degree, feeling that college life wasn't for him. Instead, he pivoted toward his true passion, stand-up comedy. This marked a major turning point, shifting his focus from martial arts to entertainment. In 1988, Rogan performed his first stand-up routine at a small comedy club in Boston. Despite the modest setting, the crowd's enthusiastic response revealed a natural gift: his ability to read a room and deliver laughter. Starting with tiny gigs, Rogan slowly built a name for himself in the comedy circuit. In the early 1990s, he moved to Los Angeles to pursue comedy more seriously. Before long, he landed roles in TV sitcoms like Hardball, but his most prominent role came as Joe Garelli in the NBC comedy series News Radio, which ran from 1995 to 1999. The show gave Rogan mainstream exposure, but also left him feeling boxed in by the constraints of network television. Despite his acting success, Rogan never abandoned stand-up. In fact, he continued performing regularly, refining a comedic style that was sharp, socially observant, and brutally honest. Around the late 90s, he began testing the waters as a TV host. The big break came in 2001 when he became the host of the reality show Fear Factor on NBC. The show ran for 6 seasons, 2001 to 2006, making Rogan a household name. Ironically, his time in mainstream TV left him feeling creatively suffocated. He disliked the scripted nature, the editorial control, and the political correctness that networks imposed. That frustration was a key reason why he eventually shifted to independent content creation. On one hand, Rogan used his Fear Factor fame to boost his brand. On the other, he continued touring nationwide as a stand-up comic. where he could speak freely and censored. Though known for his brash humor and alpha energy, Rogan keeps a relatively private personal life. In 2009, he married Jessica Ditzel, a former model and cocktail waitress. The couple shares 2 daughters, and Rogan has also adopted Ditzel's daughter from a previous relationship. The family lives mostly out of the public eye, staying away from the typical Hollywood limelight, even though Rogan remains one of the most influential media figures alive today. One of the most unique aspects of Rogan's biography is his constant evolution across seemingly unrelated fields, from martial artist, actor, and TV host to comedian, and, finally, one of the most powerful podcasters in the world. These varied life experiences have shaped a multidimensional persona, someone who can hold his own with world-class intellectuals and still crack sharp jokes about everyday life. Early career, stand-up, television, and UFC. After a turbulent childhood and years of soul-searching, Joe Rogan began to carve out a real career through stand-up comedy, a field where he didn't just have passion, but a natural flair. Inspired by legends like Richard Pryor, Sam Kinison, and Bill Hicks, Rogan approached comedy as a way to observe society and reflect on it through a sharp, humorous lens. He frequently performed at local comedy clubs in Boston before eventually relocating to New York City and later to Los Angeles to chase bigger opportunities in the entertainment world. Though his early performances were modest in size, they became the training ground where Rogan developed his signature comedic voice, mixing everyday anecdotes with controversial topics and philosophical insights. When he moved to Los Angeles in the early 1990s, it didn't take long for TV producers to notice his confidence and stage presence. He landed his first television role in the 1994 sitcom Hardball, but his real breakout came when he was cast as Joe Garelli in NBC's hit series News Radio, which ran from 1995 to 1999. In News Radio, Rogan played a goofy radio station technician, a role that somewhat mirrored his real-life personality, unfiltered, bold, and a bit rebellious. Though not the lead, his natural performance and chemistry with the cast made him a memorable part of the ensemble. Still, Rogan never saw himself as a full-time TV actor. He continued doing stand-up regularly, insisting that the comedy stage was where he felt most free, unbound by scripts, producers, or censors. A major turning point in Rogan's TV career came in 2001 when he was offered the role of host for NBC's Fear Factor. The show quickly became a sensation, throwing contestants into extreme and outrageous challenges. With a strong voice, calm demeanor, and approachable attitude, Rogan became a familiar face to millions of American households across 6 seasons. While the job came with massive paychecks and mainstream fame, Rogan remained skeptical of the tightly controlled environment of mainstream television. He was outspoken in criticizing the industry for its lack of creative freedom and ideological bias. Beyond comedy and television, martial arts continue to play a pivotal role in Rogan's life, particularly through his connection with the UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship. After years of Taekwondo training and competition, Rogan became a hardcore fan of mixed martial arts, MMA. Initially, he attended UFC events purely as an enthusiast, but his deep knowledge and sharp commentary quickly earned him a gig as a backstage interviewer in the late 1990s. By 2002, he had become a full-fledged color commentator for the UFC, a role he held for years, becoming a vital part of the MMA community. His work with the UFC not only kept him close to his martial arts roots, but also helped build his credibility as someone who wasn't just a fan. He was an expert. Rogan didn't just describe the fights. He broke down techniques and fighter strategies in a way that was both accessible and intelligent. UFC President Dana White has even called Rogan the secret weapon behind the sport's breakthrough in the American and global markets. What made Rogan's early career truly unique was his refusal to be boxed into any one identity. He wasn't a traditional host, a classic actor, or a mainstream comic. He was, and still is, an individualist, capable of crossing boundaries in entertainment and leaving a distinct mark in every field he touches. His rare blend of martial arts insight, stage performance, and intellectual curiosity laid the groundwork for what would soon become one of the biggest independent media empires in the world, his podcast. The Joe Rogan Experience. How it became the biggest show on earth. The Joe Rogan Experience, often referred to simply as JRE, launched on December 24th, 2009, at a time when podcasting was still an obscure experimental medium. The very first recording was raw and unpolished. No script, no fancy studio, just Joe Rogan and his longtime friend Brian Redban, a sound technician, sitting in front of a webcam and talking to a small online audience. Neither of them had any idea that, just a decade later, their casual live stream would evolve into one of the most influential podcasts on the planet. At first, Rogan treated the podcast as a personal hobby, a space to have uncensored conversations with friends without worrying about time limits or content restrictions. What made it stand out was that Rogan wasn't trying to create a show in the traditional sense. There was no structure, no pre-approved topics, and no boundaries on where a conversation could go. For listeners who were used to carefully edited, time-boxed TV interviews, this level of authenticity felt like a breath of fresh air. That rawness became the show's biggest strength. Listeners got to eavesdrop on free-flowing discussions that sometimes stretched for hours, covering everything from psychedelics and philosophy to fitness, UFOs, and conspiracy theories. The guest list was radically diverse, featuring everyone from actors and athletes to scientists, politicians, and societal misfits. What Rogan brought to the table was a unique hosting style. Sharp yet laid-back, skeptical but open-minded. He made guests feel comfortable enough to reveal their true selves, and in doing so, turned many episodes into intimate, thought-provoking dialogues. A major turning point came in 2013, when a wave of episodes featuring public intellectuals like Graham Hancock, Sam Harris, and Neil deGrasse Tyson went viral. Suddenly, the podcast wasn't just entertainment. It became a platform where science, philosophy, and sociology could be explored in depth and in plain language. JRE began drawing in listeners far beyond the typical comedy crowd. People hungry for ideas, for curiosity, and for real conversations not filtered through a corporate lens. One of the most defining features of JRE was its lack of time constraints. While most TV interviews are capped at 30 to 60 minutes, Rogan's podcasts often run 2 to 3 hours, with some stretching past 4. That extended format allowed conversations to dive deep without being chopped up or simplified for mass appeal. Listeners felt like they were sitting in on a real conversation between real people, because they were. The show's meteoric rise became undeniable in 2018 when Rogan interviewed tech billionaire Elon Musk. During that episode, Musk famously took a puff of marijuana live on camera. The image went viral worldwide and instantly cemented the podcast's reputation as a space where unexpected, unscripted moments could happen. That episode alone racked up tens of millions of views and took JRE to a new level of global visibility. From there, the guest list kept expanding. Edward Snowden, Bernie Sanders, Kanye West, Jordan Peterson, Tulsi Gabbard, and dozens of others brought their unique perspectives to the mic. Rogan didn't shy away from inviting voices from across the spectrum: liberals, conservatives, mainstream experts, and fringe thinkers alike. That ideological openness made the podcast one of the rare platforms that resisted the increasing polarization of modern media. Then came the game changer. In 2020, Joe Rogan signed an exclusive licensing deal with Spotify, reportedly worth $100 million. Though later reports suggested the full value, including bonuses and content rights, could be as high as $200 million. It was the largest podcast deal ever made, and a signal that podcasting had evolved from a niche hobby into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Despite the massive payout, Rogan retained full creative control. He chose the guests, the topics, and the format, terms rarely offered in big media contracts. Since joining Spotify, JRE has consistently ranked as the most listened to podcast globally year after year. By 2024, the show had surpassed 2,000 episodes and billions of streams across platforms. Of course, with that level of fame came controversy. Episodes touching on COVID-19, vaccines, politics, and provocative guests sparked backlash. Some critics accused the podcast of spreading misinformation. High-profile artists like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell even pulled their music from Spotify in protest. But despite the noise, Spotify stood firm, defending Rogan's right to free speech and declining to remove any episodes, a testament to both his influence and the show's enormous commercial value. What sets the Joe Rogan Experience apart isn't just its content, but its philosophy. Total freedom, no gatekeepers, and deep respect for curiosity. Rogan isn't a traditional journalist, and that's part of his appeal. He asks the kinds of questions regular people would ask. He doesn't pander to any political tribe or trend. That has earned him a fiercely loyal fan base who don't just tune in for laughs or headlines. They show up to expand their minds. What started as a laid-back side project is now a symbol of independent media in the digital age. More than just a podcast, JRE is a cultural movement, one that celebrates open dialogue, intellectual risk-taking, and the power of being real. In a world full of noise, Joe Rogan proved that honesty still cuts through. Joe Rogan's wealth, lifestyle, investments, and financial influence. Joe Rogan may have started out on small comedy stages and once lived in a modest apartment. But over the years, he's built a personal empire that's nothing short of astounding. As of 2024, his estimated net worth sits at around $200 million, placing him among the wealthiest figures in the non-traditional media world. Rogan's wealth didn't come from a single stream. It's the result of a smartly diversified portfolio that spans stand-up comedy, television, UFC commentary, podcasting, and personal investments. The biggest financial boost came in 2020 when Rogan signed his exclusive licensing deal with Spotify. Initially reported at $100 million, later revelations indicated the deal, including performance bonuses and content licensing rights, could be worth up to $200 million over several years. It remains one of the most lucrative podcast deals in history, marking a turning point where podcasting officially transitioned from a fringe medium into a commercial powerhouse. The deal also granted Rogan full creative control, an extremely rare condition in high-level media contracts. But Spotify isn't his only revenue stream. Rogan continues to earn millions each year from his stand-up tours, which remain wildly popular across major cities in the U.S. Despite the success of his podcast, Rogan never gave up live comedy, and his shows consistently sell out thanks to a loyal fan base and his bold, socially edgy humor. According to Rogan, no matter how wealthy he becomes, the stage is where he feels most alive. Rogan also draws a hefty paycheck from his role as a UFC commentator, although he now chooses his appearances selectively, usually sticking to major events. With his deep martial arts background and natural communication skills, he's become one of the most trusted voices in the sport for over 2 decades. Additionally, Rogan has smartly invested in real estate, stocks, and tech startups, further boosting his financial portfolio. On the real estate front, Rogan is known for making savvy, long-term decisions. For years, he lived in Los Angeles, where he owned a $5 million home in Bell Canyon, a wealthy, gated community. However, in 2020, he decided to relocate to Austin, Texas. The move was partially driven by a desire to escape California's political climate and heavy taxes, but also by a preference for a freer, more relaxed lifestyle. In Austin, he purchased a $14 million mansion, spanning thousands of square feet, located by a lake, and equipped with a fully integrated podcast studio. It's not just his home, but also the operational hub for the Joe Rogan Experience since his departure from LA. Despite his multi-million-dollar net worth, Rogan's lifestyle can be described as disciplined luxury. He doesn't flash wealth like many in Hollywood. He rarely walks red carpets, doesn't obsess over luxury cars, or collect high-end watches. Instead, he spends money on the things he truly cares about: martial arts, health, fitness, nutrition, and cutting-edge tech gear. He's invested heavily in building a state-of-the-art home gym, an international-grade podcast studio, and regularly undergoes advanced health diagnostics like hormone tracking, genetic testing, and diet-based biology analysis. Rogan is also widely known for his dedication to biohacking, the practice of optimizing the body through strict regimens like the carnivore diet, only eating red meat, intermittent fasting, sauna and cryotherapy use, and nootropic supplements. These aren't just personal hobbies. They often become central topics on his podcast, reaching millions and influencing trends in wellness and self-improvement. His influence in the natural health and wellness space is massive, so much so that many supplement companies actively seek sponsorships or partnerships with him. At the heart of Rogan's financial and lifestyle philosophy is autonomy. He refuses to sign with big entertainment agencies, doesn't use managers to dictate his direction, and consistently turns down content censorship to maintain full control. This independence allows him to preserve his integrity and build a self-sufficient ecosystem, one free from the control of political or media institutions. And with an audience in the millions, he doesn't need massive ad campaigns. A single mention on his podcast can send product sales soaring, often outperforming traditional marketing. Rogan's financial influence goes even further. When he recommends a book, it becomes a bestseller. When he tests a new workout device, it sells out. When he invites an unknown guest, that person can become an overnight sensation. His ability to shape consumer behavior has made him a marketing force more powerful than most mainstream outlets. In the end, Joe Rogan isn't just a media personality, he's an institution. He's redefined what it means to have influence in the digital age, proving that with authenticity, independence, and a mic, one man can not only build wealth, but shape entire industries and conversations around the world.